Yeah, Baba Ramdev has over the last couple of weeks become a controversial figure. There has been a series of videos that have emerged. In one video, he's bad-mouthing allopathy. In another video, he's bad-mouthing doctors. I think in the same video where he's bad-mouthing doctors, he also hints or suggests very strongly that vaccines do not work. And this is dangerous, right? I mean, I'm going to start from the thing about this that worries me the most. In urban India, we know that there is a vaccine shortage because everyone wants to get vaccinated. In rural India, based on our own reporting at Hindustan Times, it's very evident that there is a significant level of vaccine hesitancy. And when someone whom people respect as a yoga guru, Ramdev, goes ahead and says this, it could lead to significant vaccine hesitancy among people. They may not want to take vaccines. And in this particular disease, as I've repeatedly said, no one is safe till everyone is safe. So everyone should get vaccinated. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, it's incumbent on the media, on the state, on influencers. And Baba Ramdev is an influencer at the end of the day. On influencers to go out and give a consistent message that vaccines work. Now you'll have to understand where Baba Ramdev is coming from, right? I mean, he's obviously built a brand around his ability to do yoga, his ability to teach yoga. The television shows he used to do on yoga were big hits. The camps he used to do on yoga were big hits. And he rather successfully parlayed this into an FMCG, a fast-moving consumer goods empire, right? So Patanjali is it's a big consumer products manufacturer, makes a range of products, personal care, home care, groceries, and people swear by the quality of some of these products. And I think Baba Ramdev was very smart because he hit upon the one thing that works for Indians, for most Indians, which is value for money. A great product at the right price. And Patanjali did really well. It took a lot of large FMCG companies, including the multinationals, by surprise. And at a time, I remember over the last 5-6 years, when even when things were not going well in the overall economy for such companies, in terms of their sales, Patanjali kept doing really well. And along the way, given what he does, Baba Ramdev has also become a political figure. I'm sure people remember that he was associated with a movement, India Against Corruption, which in some ways resulted in the birth of the Aam Aadmi Party, although of course he was never allied with the party. And because his ideology seems to be in alignment with the ideology of the ruling establishment, the Bharatiya Janata Party at the center, he is a political figure. And I have a sense that he somehow feels that this gives him some sort of immunity against going out and making these rash utterances. And I'll give you an example. We all know that after he made this fairly unscientific remark about allopathy, that the health minister was forced to write a letter to him. And I say forced because the letter looked forced. It was one of those timorous letters where it was almost as if the health minister wanted to be nice to Ramdev while writing this letter, while the letter should have been pretty harsh. And we know from experience that the health minister, judging from the tone and tenor of his letters that he's written to other people, including the former Prime Minister, that he's capable of writing really cutting letters. And the Baba Ramdev and the Baba should have received one such letter, but you saw no such thing happening. So clearly there is some level of respect that he gets from the establishment. There is some level of protection which probably he thinks he will get from such utterances because he is aligned with the establishment. And I don't think that makes sense at a time like this. It doesn't make sense at a time like this because we know what's happened with doctors and nurses and healthcare workers. They've given their lives in the midst of this pandemic, right? I mean, around the country, in rural areas, in urban areas, these are the people who are at the forefront. They have fought an illness which many people do not, which many of us did not understand for a long time, which we're just beginning to understand. They fought with inadequate medical supplies in some cases, trying to save lives. They've succeeded. They've worked continuously. There's really been not much of a respite. And to go out and to say these kind of things at this time seems insensitive. The second point is we all know that there is an established treatment protocol for COVID. And that established treatment protocol, one on which the Indian government has signed off on, because the Indian Council of Medical Research is the one that has put out this protocol, suggests a line of treatment, and much of it is allopathic. Sure, it says you can have Ayurvedic immunity boosting things and everything else, but it's very, very scientific, and it's pretty much based on allopathy. So at a time like this, to ask questions of this nature could well mean that people start shunning these drugs and go out and start using things that they're not supposed to, which could result in more fatalities, in the infection spreading. So it's unscientific. And but I just think that it's a disservice to allopathy. But I also think some of his utterances, and also the way that he's gone about pushing his own drug, which is coronal, which at some point in time was being pitched as this big miracle cure for COVID, before, of course, he was forced to stop calling it that. I think he does as much as a disservice to Ayurveda as he does to allopathy, because all of these are any medicine, any cure has to be evidence-based, right? And I think that is a very, very important thing for us to remember at this point in time. Let's talk a little bit about the need for evidence-based science. And I say this because when COVID emerged on the scene, it was unknown. We didn't know what would work on it. People were experimenting with all sorts of drugs. And I think in some ways, the bar that was there previously, the evidence-based science bar that was there for medicines, came down a little bit during the pandemic because we didn't have a cure for this. It was an unknown disease. People were dying. Let's not forget the fact that in the first wave, not so much in India, but if you look at the first wave and look at what it did in Europe, you look at what it did in UK, you look at what it did in the US, it wreaked havoc in terms of deaths. And people didn't know what the cure was. So everyone was wandering around, people were experimenting with all sorts of things. And I think in some ways, the bar on evidence-based science for medicines came down. Now, this is a very, very important bar. It's something that needs to be there for Ayurveda. And I think one of the reasons why Ayurveda has been a slow starter has not been because it does not have potential. I think it has immense potential. I think there are cures there in Ayurveda which haven't even been marketed properly, which haven't been, which people have not been educated about properly, because it is a proper science. But I think where the problem lies is the fact that I don't think there has been enough of an organized approach which is based strongly on evidence-based science, which pushes Ayurvedic products. The minute you start doing this, I think you will realize the potential, the real potential of Ayurveda, because it's a real science. It's not like some of these other alternative streams of medicine which actually are not based on science, because Ayurveda is based on solid science. And I think in many ways, we have ourselves to blame for the disservice that we've done it. Because even if you look at the Ayush Ministry, they recently launched a product called AS64 and claimed that it was a cure, it would help in the case of corona, right? And there is really not enough evidence. It is not an evidence-based product. But why Ayurveda, right? And I think this is the problem. Because the bar has been lower, and because doctors and health professionals do not know what works, the level of experimentation and the kind of prescription that's happening for COVID is frightening. So one of Bombay's top specialists, Lancelot Pinto, spoke to us, and we came out with a very nice article on this in Hindustan Times, which pointed out that most of the drugs that were being given to people, whether it's favipiravir, whether it is doxy, which is the antibiotic, whether it's zinc, whether it's the vitamins, of course, there's no harm if you take vitamins, whether it's ivermectin, whether it's steroids, of how, and steroids, of course, work in a later stage in certain cases, but there was an indiscriminate prescription of it going on. And we see where it's taken us, right? I mean, the main reason why you have an epidemic within the pandemic, mucormycosis happening within the larger context of corona, is because of one of the reasons is the overuse of steroids, right? The other reason is the proclivity of Indians for diabetes. Third reason could well be hygiene. There are many reasons that are being that are being put forth as hypothesis, but steroids reduce immunity in some way, and right, I think the overuse of steroids could well be a reason why we are seeing this, and I just think that this indiscriminate prescription, indiscriminate use has resulted in a lot of problems. So even in allopathy, in the course of the pandemic, there hasn't been enough evidence-based science being followed, and I think it's important to do that. It doesn't matter what stream of medicine you're talking about. It doesn't matter what drug you're talking about. DRDO launched a so-called miracle drug a few weeks back. Again, in partnership with one of the smartest pharmaceutical companies around, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. But again, it has to meet the bar of evidence-based science. Does it meet that bar? One of the few things that have been perfected in the process of how drugs are tested and drugs are launched is the kind of trials that happen and the bar that drugs have to meet before it can be said that they work in a human context. But let me give you an example. Many of these drugs, for instance, ivermectin, at a time when ivermectin first started being used for corona, and I say at a time because since then there have been some human trials, but at that time, the only context in which ivermectin seemed to have any effect was an in vitro test, which means it was a petri dish or a lab test. It wasn't being tested in vivo, which is in the human body. And some of these other drugs that are being launched, I'm told, have used what is called in silico testing, which means, it's pretty much a model which is there on the computer and you're using it and you're saying like, oh, this could work. And I think it's very important to go through the proper clinical trial mechanism and for us to strongly depend on evidence-based medicine when it comes to drugs. Doesn't matter whether they are allopathic, doesn't matter whether they are Ayurvedic. That's the bigger message in this whole Baba Ramdev controversy that's happening right now.